How's it going? Today I'm working on replacing a wheel hub assembly on this 2014 Jeep Cherokee. Passenger side, I think it's a passenger side wheel hub is gone bad. I'll have to double check that. But it's gonna be a real basic video. It's also the same process if you're gonna change your brake pads out or replace a caliper or a rotor. I basically have to take those things off first before I get to the wheel hub. So this video can be used for both. I'm not going to go over every little detail, just kind of the basics of everything. So here's my wheel hub assembly. This is how they are in most cars today. You replace the whole wheel bearing and the hub all in one. A few special things you may need is a hammer slide. This is to actually pull that old hub out. You may need it, you may not, depending on how long yours has been on there, how rusted it is and things like that. Better to have it and not need it to need it and not have it. So you can rent these from AutoZone. You also need the axle puller. This pulls the axle out. The other thing you'll need that you may not have is you want to make sure you have the right axle nut socket or socket, a big socket. I had the wrong ones, wrong sizes, so I had to go get it. But this goes, that's your axle nut right there. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen mine up before I jack the car up. That way I can actually get it loose and the rotor won't spin. You do have to take those little covers off first. I actually took mine off yesterday, then realized I didn't have the right size socket to get this axle nut off. So you have to take the wheel off to get these off. I'll show a quick video right here. Up, take the wheel off. I'm using all hand tools. This can be done with hand tools. I do have a impact wrench that I'm going to use just to kind of cheat, but you don't have to use that stuff. This can all be done with regular hand tools. Okay, with the vehicle jacked up, tire taken off, I loosened our axle nut. At this point, if you just needed to change your brake pads, all you'd have to do, you got your 9/16 bolt out, just the bottom one. That allows you to just open this caliper up just like so. And here's the brake pads. As you can see, mine are brand new. And then you just pop those out with the screwdriver and put your new ones in, and then you're ready to go. All right, so before we get our caliper back on, what we want to do is we got to push that piston back in. So what you do is you get a clamp, or they make a special tool. We're just going to put one of the old brake pads back in there, and we're just going to clamp this. That way that piston closes. That way we have room for the new thicker pads to fit. Otherwise we won't be able to fit them in there and then get it onto the rotor. So we just got to close that piston. Take your oil filler cap off, that gives it a little space for air to escape, and then all we're going to do is just close this up. Okay, just start clamping it down. And as you can see, it is closing. We want to get it all the way closed. And then we're going to move our clamp. One thing I wanted to mention too, if you're just doing your brake pads, these you may have to have an 11/16 wrench to hold this inside nut, because it might spin too, so you're gonna have to hold that and then turn your other bolt on the back. What I'm gonna do next is take off the caliper bracket off of the steering knuckle, and that is 2 bolts, 15 Jeep. It is a 5/8 size socket. Sorry, it's 2014 Jeep, but I'm sure they're the same thing. So I've already loosened it with the breaker bar. This is definitely something you will need to break all these bolts loose, is a breaker bar. I'm not using air tools. You can do this all with hand tools. So there's one bolt up here, and then there's another one down here on the bottom. Break them loose, take them off, and then we'll get this whole caliper bracket off. Got my caliper hanging. Now we're to the point, if you needed to change your rotors, this is going to be your last step. All you gotta do is, don't forget to remove this little hex nut here. It is a T30, and it shouldn't be on there real tight. Okay, and my rotors were just replaced, so it's going to come off really easy. Yours is probably going to be, most likely is going to be rusted on there. It may be pretty difficult to get off. If you're replacing them, you just grab a hammer, hit it on the top, bottom, maybe side to side, and eventually it will fall off. Bigger hammer may come in handy here. Bigger, but get a little bit more force with this one. Okay, that's how you do that. Bigger hammer will help out. If you had like a little sledge, you probably get that off in 1 or 2 hits. Okay. One thing I do want to mention, since these are slotted, there is one, they're specific for what side of the vehicle they're on. They did put a little sticker on here that said front driver side. It's because of the way that these slots are. So there's the rotor off, and what happens is it just gets rusted on here, and then it makes it very difficult to get off. But as you can see, it's basically just on there, and it gets rusted on the back. But it just slides right off. I also want to say, if you are doing your brakes or calipers, you want to let your car cool down for a minute if you just got done driving it, because these rotors and brakes get very hot very easily. Just a little heads up. So now this is already loose. What I'm going to do is loosen up these bolts on the back. So the 4 hub bolts, 2 on this side, they're actually a 9/16, I believe, 7/16 socket for this Jeep. I believe 7/16 socket for this Jeep. Didn't have my caliper secured good enough. Alright, but didn't have my caliper secured good enough. Alright, but I got the 4 7/16 size bolts pretty much all the way out now. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to loosen this axle nut a little bit more, get it all the way to the end. I'm just gonna hit it a little bit just to get it loosened up on there. I'm gonna use a hammer and just hit it a couple times. I don't want to mar this, so we're gonna put that on a little bit. Okay, I took the axle nut completely off. I hit it a few times, as you can see. It's loose, it's coming out. So now we just gotta get this off. I'm gonna try just whacking it a few times. I put a little WD-40 in there. Make sure nothing else is actually holding it on, and there's not, so it's just welded in there. Okay, let's give it a couple more whacks. It is loose, so that's good, but I'm going to use this slide hammer just to show you how to use it, and I do have it, so let me get that set up. So like I said, mine's probably pretty loose, and I can probably just bang it off with a hammer, but I did rent this slide hammer with this axle nut or axle attachment. Basically just use 2 of your lug nuts, put them into the wheel hub. This one doesn't really want to go. It's hard to put in there, I don't know why, so I don't really want to. But it's going okay now. So we're just gonna get those on there. And then the middle part just slides in. So I don't have to go all the way. We're gonna use this locking nut. Get that on there. Now, all you do is slam that back and forth. Expecting this to come off fairly easy, so you just like that. Stopped using that slide hammer. I don't like what it did to my lug nuts. Kind of messed them up a little bit right there from putting them in. And man, just was not working. But as you can see, I've separated it from the knuckle here. So we're almost there. I'm just using a hammer, hitting the top of it. It should be pretty much off here in a second. Go. Push the axle back in. There we fucking go. As you can see, around the edges, it's just corroded. And there it is. And there's our axle. Get that cleaned up a bit. Obviously, if some cars have their ABS sensor, it goes right into the hub. This one is actually on the knuckle right there. So I'll get this cleaned up, and then we can get the other one, start working on getting the other one in here. Okay, here's our new wheel hub assembly. What I did is went ahead and cleaned up the outside of that and the inside, put a little anti-seize in there. That way if this ever has to come off again, it should come off a lot easier. But so this is just gonna go right in there. Try to keep that clean. Slide our axle through. It's gonna go just like that. Okay. Both hands here, but once we get that axle through there, and then we'll put our bolts on. So we got it on. We got our axle pulled through. The axle should slide right through. The splines should line up pretty easy. If there's any resistance, then just make sure they're lined up inside the grooves. And you put your axle nut back on, crank it down a bit. That'll pull this out. That'll pull it out a little. We're gonna go ahead and put our 4 bolts back in, get our hub connected, and reverse process. So let's continue on here. Got the bearing back on. The bearing to knuckle bolts for this Jeep are torque specs is 70 foot-pounds. I'm gonna go ahead and torque those down. We got our nut on. I haven't torqued that down yet. I believe that is 175 foot-pounds is what you want that at for this Jeep. I'm gonna tighten it by hand right now. When I lower the car down, then I'll do the remaining torque, just to be safe. Actually, I might have to do that first before I lower it. But go ahead and put the rotor back on, get the brake caliper back on, put the wheel back on, and then that's pretty much the job. The main points of doing a wheel hub bearing replacement. One reason why I think I'm going to tighten that down first is when we put these axle nut caps back on, they have to be done from the inside, so you have to have the wheel off. So I won't be able to lower the car and then tighten that. So I think I'm going to do that now. But yeah, that's it. I'll just torque those down, get the rotor back on. Got the rotor back on. One thing I will mention real quick is there is only one hole where your little rotor bolt fits into. It's a little bit smaller than where your lug nuts go. There's one extra one, and you'll know if you try to put this in, it won't thread, it'll just go right in. Gonna get that torqued down, and it's pretty much the end of the job right there. Get the wheel back on. We'll torque down our axle nut. I believe it's 175 pounds. Put our caps back on our tires, and then we'll put our tire back on, and that is it. I hope this is informative to somebody. If you have any questions about anything, just leave me a comment. I'll try to answer it the best I can. And until next time, be safe out there. Thanks for watching.